They never warn you about this part of marriage. They never tell you what happens when the glow fades, when your body changes, when the man who once couldn't keep his hands off you starts looking away. I was carrying his child, his heir, the future of his billion-dollar empire. And yet, I had never felt so invisible in my life. I was married to a billionaire, powerful, admired, desired by women across the world. But when I became pregnant, something shifted. Not loudly, not cruelly, quietly. The touches stopped first, then the looks, then the way he used to see me. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself pregnancy hormones were messing with my head. Until the night I overheard a conversation that shattered everything I believed about love, marriage, and myself. This is my story, and it didn't end the way anyone expected. Before pregnancy, before doubt, before the silence crept into our bedroom, I was his favorite thing in the world. I remember that version of myself clearly. I was confident, desired, seen. My name is Eva, and I married Daniel, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the tech and real estate world. When we met, my life felt like something out of a dream. Private jets, gala dinners, penthouse views, and a man who looked at me like I was the only woman in existence. Daniel was intense, focused, and commanding. The kind of man who entered a room and bent the atmosphere around him. But with me, he was soft, at least, in the beginning. He loved the way I dressed, the way I laughed too loudly at inappropriate moments, the way I challenged him when no one else dared. He used to tell me, "Whoa, Eva, you make me forget the weight of everything I carry." And I believed him. We married quickly, too quickly, some people said. But when love feels big, when life feels unstoppable, you don't slow down, you leap. The wedding was extravagant. Magazines covered it. People called me lucky. What they didn't see were the quiet moments, the late-night talks, the way he used to trace circles on my back before falling asleep, the way he reached for me in the dark, like he needed reassurance that I was real. Those moments made me feel chosen. For the first year, our marriage was everything I had imagined. Passionate, playful, safe. Then I got pregnant. At first, Daniel was overjoyed. He lifted me off the ground when I told him, spinning me around the living room like a child. He whispered promises into my hair about the future, about legacy, about family. I thought a baby would bring us closer. I had no idea it would test everything. Because pregnancy doesn't just change your body, it changes how the world looks at you. And sometimes, how the person you love looks at you too. I didn't notice the shift immediately. It started subtly. He stayed at work later, traveled more, kissed my forehead instead of my lips. I told myself it was stress, that he was under pressure, that I was being dramatic. But deep down, a quiet fear began to grow. What if I wasn't the one he married anymore? As my body changed, I started watching him more closely. The way his eyes lingered on women who hadn't changed. The way his touch felt was careful, distant. I loved my baby already. But some nights, alone in our massive bed, I cried silently, terrified of what pregnancy was taking away from me. And the worst part? I felt guilty for even thinking that way. Because what kind of woman feels insecure while carrying life? But love doesn't disappear loudly. Sometimes, it fades quietly while you're trying to be grateful. And I was about to learn just how fragile attraction can be, especially in a marriage built under bright lights and high expectations. Pregnancy didn't happen to me all at once. It arrived quietly, in small ways I didn't recognize at first. My waist softened before I noticed. My breasts felt heavier, more sensitive. My skin stretched in places that had never known change. At first I thought it was beautiful. I would stand in front of the mirror after a shower, one hand resting on my growing stomach, whispering softly to the life inside me. I felt powerful in a way I never had before, like my body was doing something miraculous. But slowly, the mirror stopped being kind. My favorite dresses stopped fitting. My heels hurt faster. My energy disappeared without warning. And somewhere between doctor appointments and late-night cravings, I realized something else had changed too. Daniel wasn't looking at me the same way. He still loved me, at least I think he did. But desire is a different language. Before pregnancy, his eyes followed me without effort. Now, they paused, then moved away. When I walked past him naked after a shower, he didn't pull me close like he used to. He'd smile politely, kiss my cheek, ask if I was tired. At first, I made excuses for him. He's trying to be respectful. He doesn't want to hurt the baby, he's stressed. But respect doesn't feel like distance, and stress doesn't explain loneliness. The bed became the quietest place in the house. We still slept beside each other, but it felt like an ocean lay between us. His body faced away from mine more often. When I reached for him in my sleep, sometimes my hand landed on nothing but cold sheets. Stopped trying after a while. I didn't want to beg for what used to be natural. One night, I wore one of the silk robes he used to love. I curled my hair, put on light makeup, nothing dramatic, just enough to feel like myself again. I wanted him to see me. When he came home, he smiled. But it was the smile you give a friend, a sister, someone safe. "You look comfortable," he said. Comfortable. That word stayed with me longer than it should have. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't sting. Pretending I didn't go to the bathroom afterward and sit on the edge of the tub, holding my stomach, asking my unborn child why love suddenly felt conditional. I started noticing everything. How Daniel spent more time on his phone, how his hugs became shorter, how intimacy turned into careful pecks and polite affection. And the worst part? He never said anything was wrong. There was no fight, no accusation, no betrayal I could point to, just absence. When I brought it up gently one evening, he sighed like I'd asked something inconvenient. "Eva, you're pregnant. Of course things are different," he said. Different, not temporary, not evolving, different. I wanted to scream that pregnancy wasn't a disease, that I was still his wife, that my body hadn't betrayed him, it was giving him a child. But instead, I nodded. Because when you're married to a powerful man, you learn early how to swallow disappointment gracefully. I stopped dressing up, stopped initiating, stopped expecting. And that's when the emotional distance grew teeth. I began to feel less like a woman and more like a responsibility. The baby was loved. I was tolerated. Some nights, I lay awake wondering if attraction had an expiration date, if beauty was only valuable when it was effortless, if the vows we spoke had fine print no one warned me about. And the most painful thought of all? What if this wasn't temporary? What if pregnancy didn't just change my body, but changed the way my husband saw me forever? Temptation never announces itself. It doesn't arrive with loud music or obvious intention. It comes quietly, when you're vulnerable, unseen, and already doubting yourself. For me, it came on a Thursday afternoon. I had stepped out for a prenatal appointment, feeling heavy and tired, my feet swollen, my emotions even heavier. Daniel had been too busy to come with me again. I told myself it didn't matter, but it did. After the appointment, I stopped at a small cafe near the hospital. I wanted something sweet, something comforting, somewhere quiet. That's when I felt it. Someone is looking at me, not staring, not rudely, just seeing me. I looked up and caught his eyes. He was sitting 2 tables away, early 30s maybe, well-dressed, but relaxed. The kind of man who looked confident without trying. His gaze didn't flick away when I noticed him. Instead, he smiled, soft, respectful, not at my body, at me. My first instinct was discomfort. I adjusted my coat, suddenly aware of my stomach, my fuller face, the parts of myself I'd started to feel ashamed of. But he didn't look away. He didn't seem disappointed. If anything. His expression warmed. A few minutes later, as I stood to leave, he spoke. "Excuse me," he said gently. "I just wanted to say, you look beautiful." I froze. Not glowing, not radiant, not brave, beautiful. I felt my throat tighten. I hadn't heard that word directed at me in months. "Thank you," I replied quickly, my voice softer than I intended. He nodded once, not pushing, not lingering. "Have a good day." And that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't, because I carried that moment home with me. That night, Daniel came in late again. He loosened his tie, kissed my forehead, and went straight to the shower. He didn't notice my hair, my dress, the way I'd tried. I lay in bed afterward, replaying that stranger's smile, over and over, and I hated myself for it. Days passed, but something had shifted. I became more aware of the world outside my marriage, of how men still noticed me, how kindness from strangers felt warmer than indifference from my husband. Then temptation took a bolder step. At a charity event Daniel insisted we attend, one of those glamorous evenings full of champagne and shallow conversations, I felt invisible again. Daniel left me at a table while he talked business, his hand slipping from mine too easily. That's when I saw him. The man from the cafe. This time he recognized me first. "Hi," he said, surprise flickering across his face. "We meet again." I laughed nervously. "I guess we do." His name was Marcus. He spoke to me like I mattered, asked how I was feeling, asked about the baby, not out of obligation but curiosity. He listened, really listened. When Daniel finally returned, Marcus stepped back politely, introducing himself. There was no disrespect, no crossing lines, but Daniel noticed something, the way Marcus looked at me, the way I stood a little taller, smiled a little more. On the drive home, Daniel was quiet. I almost hoped he'd ask. He didn't. That night, guilt and longing fought inside me until I couldn't tell which one hurt more. I hadn't done anything wrong, but for the first time since becoming pregnant, I felt desired by someone who wasn't my husband. And that terrified me, because temptation wasn't about wanting someone else. It was about wanting to feel like myself again. I told myself it was a coincidence, nothing more. The city was large, lives crossed, people reappeared all the time. That's what I repeated in my head when I saw Marcus again, 3 days after the charity event. Outside the bookstore near my prenatal clinic. I was standing there, flipping through a display of children's books I wasn't ready to buy yet, when I heard his voice behind me. "You're everywhere," he said, amused. I turned, startled. And there he was, smiling, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. "Or maybe you're following me," I replied lightly, though my heart was already racing. "Guilty," he joked. Then more softly, "How are you feeling today?" No one ever asked me that anymore. Not really. "I'm okay," I said. Tired, emotional, hungry every 20 minutes. He laughed. "Sounds like a lot." "It is." We stood there longer than we should have, talking about nothing important, about books, about the strange way life reroutes you when you least expect it. He didn't ask about my husband. I didn't volunteer the information. When my phone buzzed, Daniel asking if I'd be home late, I felt the familiar pull of guilt tighten around my ribs. "I should go," I said. Marcus hesitated, then said, carefully, "I'd like to stay in touch, if that's okay." There was no pressure in his voice, no expectation, just honesty. I stared at him for a moment, hearing all the warnings in my head. Pregnant, married, billionaire wife. But I was also lonely, so unbearably lonely. I gave him my number. The first text came an hour later. "Did you make it home safely?" I stared at the screen longer than necessary before replying. "Yes, thank you for asking." That night, Daniel fell asleep with his back to me again. And I lay there, phone glowing softly in my hand. Marcus texted about his day. I told him about the baby kicking for the first time that afternoon. He responded with genuine excitement, tiny exclamation marks that felt strangely intimate. By the end of the week, we were texting every day. Nothing inappropriate, nothing obvious, just constant. "Did you eat? How was the appointment?" You crossed my mind today. Messages that arrived when Daniel didn't notice me leave the room, when he forgot my cravings, when he didn't ask how I was feeling anymore. Marcus remembered everything, the little things, my favorite tea. The way mornings were harder than evenings, how I felt heavier emotionally than physically. I started smiling at my phone without realizing it. I started hiding it without meaning to. There were moments, standing in the shower, folding tiny baby clothes, lying awake at night, when I wondered how something so simple had grown so quickly. We never talked about boundaries. That scared me, because boundaries only matter when something is already crossing them. One afternoon, he sent a message that made my breath catch. "I hope you know, I don't see you the way the world does. I typed, deleted, typed again. What does that mean? It means I see you. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. Because admitting how much that meant would have forced me to admit how empty I'd been feeling for far too long. That night, Daniel reached for me out of habit, his hand resting briefly on my waist before pulling away again. I stared at the ceiling, Marcus's words echoing in my mind. And for the first time since becoming pregnant, I wondered something I was ashamed to even think. What if emotional distance was just as dangerous as physical betrayal? It happened on a quiet afternoon. One of those days when the house feels too still and your thoughts get louder because there's nothing to drown them out. I had been craving groceries, nothing extravagant, just fresh fruit, soup ingredients, things the doctor recommended. I stared at my phone longer than I should have, debating whether to ask the staff. Instead, I texted Marcus. I hate asking, I wrote. But could you help me pick up a few things? I'm exhausted today. His reply came instantly. Of course, I'll bring them to you. I should have said thank you and left it at that. I didn't. He arrived an hour later, arms full of grocery bags, his presence filling the doorway in a way that made my pulse quicken. He looked at me carefully, like he was reading something unspoken in my face. You look tired, he said softly. I am. He stepped inside, setting the bags down, moving with an ease that made it feel natural, like he belonged there. We talked while unpacking, about nothing, about everything. He stayed longer than planned. I didn't ask him to leave. At some point, we ended up sitting on the couch, too close, our knees brushed. The room felt warmer. You shouldn't be alone so much, Marcus said quietly, especially now. I'm fine, I replied automatically. He looked at me, searching my face. You don't sound fine. I didn't respond. He reached out, not touching me at first, just hovering like he was asking permission without words. When his fingers finally brushed mine, I felt it everywhere. I don't want to pressure you, he said, but you deserve affection, care, connection. My heart was racing. I told myself to stand up, to move away. Instead, I leaned closer. He was close enough now that I could feel his warmth, not just physically, but emotionally, like he had stepped into a space inside me that had been empty for too long. Ava, he murmured, my name sounding different on his lips, slower, heavier. My breath caught as his fingers finally closed around mine. Not tight, not urgent, just enough to let me know he was there, that I wasn't alone. I should have pulled away. Instead, I looked up at him. His eyes searched my face, giving me time, giving me the chance to stop him. When I didn't, he leaned in slowly, so slowly that every second felt stretched thin with anticipation. His lips brushed mine first. Barely there, a question. My heart slammed against my ribs. When I didn't move away, he kissed me again, deeper this time. Still gentle, still careful, like he was afraid of breaking something fragile. I tasted his breath, felt the soft pressure of his lips. The way his hand tightened slightly around mine, grounding me. My body responded before my mind could catch up, leaning into him, lips parting just enough to invite more. The kiss wasn't rushed. It was aching. It was the kind of kiss filled with everything unsaid. Loneliness, longing, restraint. The kind that made your chest tighten instead of your body burn. For a moment, I forgot who I was supposed to be. Forgot the ring on my finger. Forgot the distance in my marriage. Forgot everything except the feeling of being wanted. Then reality crashed back in. I pulled away sharply, breath uneven, my heart pounding like it was trying to warn me. No, I whispered, shaking my head. I can't do this. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside Daniel, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, my hand resting on the curve of my stomach, my mind replaying everything I had almost done, every second of it, every feeling, every weakness. The kiss had ended, but it hadn't left me. Guilt sat heavy in my chest, pressing down until it became hard to breathe. Not because I had betrayed my husband's body, but because in my heart, I had already crossed a line. By morning, I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. If I didn't tell him now, I would lose myself forever. Daniel was in the kitchen when I walked in, dressed for work, tie half done, scrolling through his phone like nothing in the world was wrong, like my entire life hadn't just tilted off its axis. "Daniel," I said quietly. He looked up, immediately sensing something in my voice. He always did, at least, he used to. "What's wrong?" he asked. I swallowed. My hands were shaking. "I need to tell you something." He put his phone down, untied his tie, gave me his full attention for the first time in weeks, and that alone almost broke me. I almost kissed someone else. The words fell between us like shattered glass. Daniel didn't speak at first. He just stared at me. "I didn't sleep with him," I rushed to say, tears already forming. I stopped myself, but I need you to know because keeping it inside feels worse than the truth. The silence stretched. Then Daniel exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Who?" he asked. "A man from the grocery store," I whispered. "Marcus." His jaw tightened. "Why?" he asked, not angry yet, just hurt. And that hurt cut deeper than any rage ever could. "Because I felt invisible," I said, my voice cracking. "Because I didn't recognize myself anymore. Because I didn't feel wanted. Because I was lonely even when you were right next to me." The tears spilled freely now. "I didn't want to betray you," I continued. "I wanted to feel like a woman again, not just a body carrying a child. I wanted to feel chosen." Daniel sank into the chair across from me, his shoulders slumping. "When did this start?" he asked quietly. "After the pregnancy," I said, "after everything changed." His eyes flicked briefly to my stomach, then back to my face. "I didn't know," he murmured. "That's the problem," I replied softly. "You didn't know because you stopped looking." That was the moment his composure cracked. "I was scared," he admitted, voice low. "Scared of hurting you, scared of doing something wrong, scared of losing you, and instead, I pulled away." He rubbed his face, breathing uneven. "I thought giving you space was love." "And I thought silence meant rejection," I said. We stared at each other, two people who loved each other deeply, but had been speaking different languages for months. "I never wanted to hurt you," I whispered. "I wanted to come back to you before it was too late." Daniel stood slowly and crossed the room. When he reached me, he didn't touch me right away. He knelt, right in front of me. His hands hovered near my stomach, hesitant, respectful. "You're still my wife," he said, "and this is still my child." His voice broke on the last word. "I don't know how to fix everything yet," he continued, "but I know this. I don't want to lose you, not now, not ever." I sobbed then, quiet, ugly sobs that came from weeks of bottled fear and longing. He pulled me into his chest, holding me carefully like he was afraid I might shatter. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not perfect, not beautiful, but honest. And sometimes, honesty is the beginning of healing. Rebuilding intimacy didn't happen the way movies made it seem. There was no sudden passion, no dramatic moment where everything snapped back into place. It started with silence, the quiet kind that wasn't heavy with resentment anymore, but cautious, uncertain, like we were both afraid that one wrong word might send everything collapsing again. Daniel didn't touch me that night, not because he didn't want to, but because he was afraid. I could see it in the way he lay on his side of the bed, his back turned slightly toward me, leaving just enough space between us to acknowledge the distance without widening it further. And for the first time, I understood. Pregnancy hadn't only changed my body, it had changed his confidence too. The next morning, he made breakfast. Nothing fancy, toast, eggs, fruit, but he placed the plate in front of me gently, like it mattered how I received it. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Not the baby, not the pregnancy, me. "I'm tired," I said honestly. "But lighter." He nodded. "Me too." That was how it began. Not with sex, with presence. Daniel started coming home earlier. He put his phone away at dinner. He listened, really listened, when I talked about my fears, my changing body, the strange grief of not recognizing myself in the mirror anymore. One evening, while I was folding laundry, He came up behind me. He didn't grab me, didn't assume. He just rested his hand on my back. "Is this okay?" he asked quietly. That question alone made my chest ache. "Yes," I whispered. His hand stayed there, warm, steady, not demanding anything, just reminding me that I wasn't alone in my own skin. Later that night, he asked if he could hold me, not touch me, hold me. I said yes. He wrapped his arms around me slowly, carefully, like he was relearning the shape of me, like my body was something sacred, not unfamiliar. I cried against his chest, not because I was sad, but because it felt like coming home after being lost for too long. "I'm sorry I made you feel unwanted," he murmured into my hair. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner how invisible I felt," I replied. We stayed like that for a long time. No expectations, no pressure, just closeness. The first kiss came days later, not rushed, not hungry. We were sitting on the couch, watching something neither of us was paying attention to. I turned toward him without thinking, my hand resting on his knee. He looked at me, really looked at me, and waited. I leaned in first. The kiss was soft, almost shy. And when we pulled apart, neither of us spoke. We just smiled. Intimacy returned in fragments. A shared shower where he washed my hair without touching anything else. A hand on my stomach as the baby kicked. Laughter in bed when we realized how awkward we felt, and how okay that was. Daniel told me things he had never said before, that he felt powerless watching my body change, that he was terrified of hurting me, that he didn't know how to be gentle without becoming distant. And I told him the truth too. That desire doesn't disappear during pregnancy, it just changes. That reassurance matters more than perfection, that I needed to feel chosen every day, not assumed. One night, as we lay tangled in sheets, not doing anything more than breathing each other in, he whispered, "I want you, still, always." I just didn't know how to show it. I turned toward him, pressing my forehead to his. "Then show me now," I said softly, "not with your body, with your presence." He kissed my temple. "I'm here." And for the first time in months, I believed him. That night, it happened naturally. Not because we planned it, not because we felt like we had to prove anything, but because something between us finally softened enough to breathe again. We were in bed, the lights dim, the world quiet. Daniel lay beside me, facing me, his hand resting on the space between my shoulder and neck, close enough to feel, careful enough not to assume. "Tell me if you want me to stop," he said. The words alone made my chest tighten. "I won't need to," I whispered. He leaned in slowly, giving me time. His lips brushed my forehead first, then my cheek, then lingered, waiting. I tilted my face toward his. That was all the permission he needed. The kiss wasn't desperate, it wasn't hurried. It was deep, intentional, like he was reminding himself who I was, and like I was rediscovering who we were together. His hands moved with reverence, not hunger. He touched me like something precious, something worth protecting. Every movement said, "I see you, not I want from you." When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "You're still beautiful," he said quietly. Not in spite of this, because of it. Tears filled my eyes. I needed to hear that, I admitted. He kissed me again, this time with certainty. The rest unfolded slowly, tenderly. There was laughter when we felt awkward, pauses when I needed them, soft words exchanged between breaths. Nothing felt taken. Everything felt given. And when we finally rested afterward, his arm around me, my head on his chest, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Safe, chosen, loved without condition. Later that night, while Daniel slept, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't expected to see again. Marcus. My heart skipped. Not with longing, but with clarity. I stepped quietly out of bed and into the hallway, closing the door behind me before answering. "Eva," he said immediately. "I've been thinking about you." I took a breath. "You shouldn't be," I replied calmly. There was a pause on the line. "I just wanted to check on you," he said. I felt like maybe— "No," I interrupted gently but firmly. "You need to stop calling me." Silence. I'm choosing my marriage, I continued, and I need you to respect that. Another pause, longer this time. I didn't mean to cross a line, he said quietly. But you did, I answered. And this is me drawing it. When I ended the call, I didn't feel guilty. I felt relief. I returned to the bedroom and slid back into bed. Daniel stirred slightly, pulling me closer without waking. I fit into him easily now, like my body remembered what my mind had been afraid to trust. As I lay there, listening to his steady breathing, I understood something clearly for the first time. Temptation hadn't come because my marriage was broken. It came because I was lonely. And loneliness doesn't mean the end. It means something needs attention. That night, I chose up, not perfectly, not easily, but honestly. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. They were real. My body kept changing, stretching, swelling, reminding me daily that I was no longer just a woman, but a home. Some mornings I still struggled to recognize myself in the mirror. But this time, Daniel stood behind me, his hands resting on my hips, his chin on my shoulder. You're doing something extraordinary, he would say, even on days it doesn't feel beautiful. And slowly I started to believe him. We learned from each other again in the smallest ways. He began coming home earlier. I stopped pretending I was fine when I wasn't. We talked, really talked, about the fear that had lived between us. His fear of hurting me, my fear of being unwanted. Two silences colliding instead of two hearts reaching. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the windows, Daniel knelt in front of me while I sat on the couch, exhausted and emotional for no clear reason. I'm sorry, he said, not just for distance, but for assuming strength meant silence. I touched his face, feeling the familiar warmth there. And I'm sorry, I replied, for thinking love was supposed to feel effortless all the time. He smiled softly. It's not effortless. It's intentional. That night, he didn't rush me. He didn't look at me like something fragile or something broken. He looked at me like his wife, the woman he chose, the woman still choosing him back. Our intimacy became something deeper than desire. It became presence. Some nights we only held each other. Some nights we whispered about the future, about names, about the kind of parents we wanted to be, about how this child had already changed us before even arriving. And sometimes, when he kissed my belly and spoke softly to the life inside me, I had to turn away so he wouldn't see me cry, because I finally understood something. Love doesn't disappear when attraction changes. It transforms. Marcus never called again. And not once did I wonder what would have happened if I had chosen differently, because temptation fades when truth takes root. One afternoon, close to my due date, Daniel and I walked slowly through the garden behind our home. I moved carefully. He matched my pace without complaint. I was scared, I admitted, that you'd stop seeing me. He stopped walking and turned to face me fully. I never stopped seeing you, he said. I just forgot how to show it. He leaned down and kissed me. Slow, steady, certain. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a stronger one. Pregnancy didn't make me less attractive. It revealed the kind of love that lasts when beauty evolves, when bodies change, when life demands more than desire. I didn't lose my husband when I was pregnant. I found him again. And this time, we chose each other, with open eyes, open hearts, and a love deep enough to grow.